We are 24 subscribers away from reaching 20,000 subs here on the channel. So be the person that is the 20,000th subscriber and go down in Cleveland Browns YouTube history books when you hit that sub button down below. What's going on, everyone? Welcome into another edition of the Cleveland Browns Report. Matthew Peterson here with a fun show laid out for everyone today, as we are going to go through a 5-step perfect plan for the Browns from now until training camp gets underway, which, by the way, is earlier than most teams, July 22nd at the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. Because they play in the Hall of Fame game, they had one less OTA session, and they moved training camp up a week. So with that being stated, let's get into step one of a perfect plan. It's not a blockbuster move. It is the linebackers come to camp healthy, because that is the one question mark in my book that is glaring jumping out to me compared to other spots, which is, of the 3 starting linebackers who all ended last year on injured reserve, which will come into training camp healthy? I think JOK will. That's not going to surprise me. I've not seen him be injured during OTAs or minicamp. But Anthony Walker and Takitaki are both coming off major, in-season surgeries, an ACL tear for Takitaki against the Texans later in the season, and then an earlier injury in the 2022 campaign for Anthony Walker, a quad injury. And if that's not bad enough, even your backup is coming off a season-ending injury, right? Jacob Phillips also ended the year on IR. So Andrew Berry, no doubt, has invested a ton of resources in the defensive line, and clearly his strategy is that you do not need elite linebacker play, because Zadarius Smith, Myles Garrett, Dalvin Tomlinson, Obo Okoronkwo are all going to be on the field, and they are going to make it miserable for the offensive line to ever want to get to the second level. So you can maybe skim by with some less flashy linebackers because you got a very flashy defensive line. Now, at the same time, I'm going to pump the brakes on that just a little bit, just a little brake tap, right? A little love tap, because you do have 3 early AFC North games, right? Weeks 1, 2, and 4 are against the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Ravens. And the offense is brand new. Deshaun Watson said that during minicamps. Everything's new. So maybe there are some early growing pains, and that's not unusual, right? That's not just for the Browns. That is for the entire NFL. The Bengals last year got off to a slow start. There are always teams that get into some growing pains. The 49ers are a great example. So if you have some early, very important division games, you might be relying on your defense a little bit more so in the first 4 weeks of the season compared to the last 4 weeks of the season. And that's where you might need some players at the linebacker spot to step up and make some additional plays, because your offense might not be averaging 25, 28, 30 points per game. So that is the one little cause for concern with the linebacker room being a bit of a question mark in terms of the health status going into 2023. Now, speaking of the AFC North, it's wide open, in my opinion. Sure, the Bengals are the division frontrunners, but at the same time, no team has won the AFC North 3 straight years since realignment happened 20 years ago or so. So if you had to pick one team to sweep, who would you want it to be, right? Heart for me says the Pittsburgh Steelers. The brain says the Cincinnati Bengals, because they are probably the biggest hurdle within the division to get to the top. But you can also go with the Ravens, because they're going to get Lamar Jackson back for a healthy season. I don't know. We've heard this before the last 2 years. So let me know which team you would want to sweep down below. Now, the second step is, if step number 1 fails, maybe then you have to go sign a linebacker, right? Because we just kind of went through a tough early schedule for the Browns, and if they don't have healthy linebackers, maybe you turn to some familiar faces, right? Deion Jones, for example, is a free agent linebacker. Myles Jack was in the division last year, former second-round pick. Zach Cunningham from the Tennessee Titans spent most of last year on injured reserve, but who knows? Maybe Jim Schwartz vouches for Cunningham, who was a offseason cap casualty for the Titans and is still a free agent. Quan Alexander, Jared Davis, some other free agents right there. Now, if we are going to zero in on a few of these players, Cunningham and Myles Jack are 2 interesting players. Last year, Cunningham was limited to just a couple of games, had an elbow injury that cut his season short. But who knows? Jim Schwartz played with him, or coached with him rather, in Nashville. Maybe he vouches for Cunningham to come up. Plus, he was with the Texans for a while, so maybe Deshaun Watson has some good things to say. And then there's Myles Jack, who had 104 tackles last year, 3 tackles for loss. But there's a lot of donuts on the board for very important stats, right? Never had an impact play. No sacks, no forced fumbles, no interceptions. But if we're talking about depth at linebacker, you got to feel good about having a guy like Myles Jack with plenty of experience and who's been a big-time player at times in his career in Jacksonville, stepping in for a pinch, right? Taking a couple of games over from Anthony Walker or Takitaki while they work back from season-ending surgeries. Now, another guy that's still on the market is Deion Jones. And I've had a lot of people ask me in the comments section or over on Twitter, why don't the Browns go sign Deion Jones? And I don't have an awesome answer for you. I know that when Deion Jones was traded to Cleveland, the Browns and Deion Jones agreed to cut up the last part of his contract and make it a 1-year deal. I don't know if that's because Deion Jones, a guy who played his entire career in Atlanta, went to college in LSU, a south of Mason-Dixon line kind of guy, didn't want to be up north for very long, but he probably doesn't want to be out of a job for very long. So maybe he would reconsider coming back to the Browns, or maybe it's Berea that doesn't want Deion Jones. But we can admit that Deion Jones, the last 6-7 weeks of the season last year, especially when the rash of injuries started to pile up at linebacker, played pretty well. 44 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. I wouldn't be shocked if Cleveland goes back to a familiar face if Greenbrier gets underway and the Browns have a better idea of when Walker and Takitaki and Phillips are going to return, and they go, do we want to bring someone in and start from ground zero, or bring back Deion Jones, who at least knows, I mean, not the entire defense with Jim Schwartz taking over, but at least he doesn't have to wear a name tag around the locker room for the first couple of weeks. So that could be a good name to keep an eye on. Step number 3 for a perfect plan until training camp. Perion Winfrey, I just shut it down, right? Stay out of trouble. That has been his biggest Achilles heel so far in the NFL. He continues to get in his own way, and hopefully he can just work out, play some Xbox, watch some TV. A lot of good shows out there. I'm a big fan of Peacock. I got kicked off my parents' Netflix. Do whatever you have to do to not get into legal trouble, right? I don't want to see Perion Winfrey on Live PD. Another good show, by the way. But Mary Kay recently tweeted out a news update on Winfrey, who said, Browns defensive tackle Perion Winfrey's case for misdemeanor assault against a woman he was dating has been dismissed upon completion of a pretrial diversion program. So this came out June 12th, so it's not new information, but the legality side around Perion Winfrey appears to have settled down a little bit, but the NFL always does their own investigation, so you can never be quite sure you're out of the woods. Now, this was not the first instance for Perion Winfrey getting in his own way. His rookie season was full of immature decisions. Week 2, he was suspended by the team. Never quite knew why, right? Team violation. They kept that in-house. Week 8, healthy scratch. Week 9, bye. Week 10, healthy scratch. Week 11, he gets a concussion because he rides a scooter into a light post. Like, it's just silly, immature things. And it's a good reminder for everyone that, like, they're not kids, but they're definitely not 35-year-old completely mature adults. Like, a lot of these guys coming out of college are 22, 23, 24 years old. And as a 25-year-old myself right now, I don't always make the best decisions. So I can kind of sympathize with NFL players being just human beings and making some silly mistakes. But also, when you're paid that much money, maybe you would clean up your act a little bit. Now, I want Perion Winfrey to succeed. This is not an anti-Perion Winfrey portion. This is quite the opposite of that. This team is better if Perion Winfrey can play up to his expectations and level. So if you want to see Perion Winfrey succeed, let's show the guy some support. Let's know the Dog Pound has his back. Spam 97 down below in the comment section. Step number 4. If number 3 fails, sign a defensive tackle. You might be noticing a trend here because the Browns don't have glaring needs on this roster. They just need to keep it together until training camp gets underway. So if Perion Winfrey does have another run-in with the law or just a bonehead decision or mistake, Won't be shocked if Cleveland decides to kind of cut bait and move on from Winfrey after a rocky first 13, 14 months of his NFL career. And there are some notable defensive tackles still unsigned. Shelby Harris is a player that I'm pretty high on. He was really good with Denver. He was really good with Seattle last year. Ultimately, the Seahawks wanted to kind of go younger and reset. He was not cut because he was bad with Seattle. They just wanted to save some money and turn, the clock back a little bit. Matthew Ioannidis is another player that gets a lot of traction, it feels like, every year around this time. Chris Wormley with the Steelers last year. Tyler Davison, remember, the Browns acquired him mid-season off someone's practice squad. I feel like it was Ben Still came from the Dolphins. He came from the Falcons, I think. Regardless, Cleveland moved on from him a couple of weeks later, but who knows? You could always see a reunion happen. And then I just tossed on Ndamukong Suh because why not? Suh's not going to sign at anytime soon. He does not want to go through training camp at 36 years old. He has no interest in working out in the month of August. If he does come back, would sign, I suspect, like last year, mid-season to a contending team, so he does not have to run around and work out in the hot month of August. Now, the defensive line for Cleveland is loaded. I mean, credit to Andrew Berry. He recognized what this team's biggest deficiencies were, and he attacked it this offseason. Dalvin Tomlinson, Siaka Ika in the draft, and then a couple of names that kind of flew under the radar, and they're at the bottom of the depth chart. But I want to zero in on two players here, right? Maurice Hurst and Tristan Hill. And these are two players, when you look at their career stats, Maurice Hurst, we'll throw it on screen for you guys, 78 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 8 sacks, former 5th-round pick by the Las Vegas Raiders. And then there's Tristan Hill, who was a 2nd-round pick by the Dallas Cowboys, 39 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Maurice Hurst, when healthy, has been a very productive rotational defensive lineman. He just hasn't been super-duper healthy his entire career. And then Tristan Hill is sort of Perion Winfrey, but in round 2 of 2019, right? Just a lack of effort at times. It's not completely apples to apples with Winfrey, but just some immaturity issues early on in his NFL career, and the Cowboys decided we've sort of had enough and we're going to move on. But both these players have very high ceiling, very talented individuals. Different camps, though. For Tristan Hill, it's more about just getting himself in a position to succeed. And for Maurice Hurst, it's about staying healthy and staying available. But those could be two in-house promotions if something were to happen to Winfrey. Now, before we get to the rest of today's show, I am super mad at myself because I got my new Browns polo and I left it on my kitchen counter when I left for work today. But I'm going to have it tomorrow or for Thursday's live show. And you can get your own Browns polo and match Petey's polos when you go to chatsports.com/Browns polo. That link's in the comments and the description of today's video. It's an awesome time to improve your polo game, but also still repping your favorite squad, right? A little bit of business casual, kind of like Cal Naughton Jr., right? A Leonard Skinner t-shirt, party in the front, business in the front, party in the back. Thank you, Trace. So get yours today, chatsports.com/Browns polo. That link's down below, so click it right now. Plus, it's on sale, and these deals do not last forever. 5th and final prong of a perfect plan for Cleveland. No roster tinkling, right? No reason to go down to the roster and make some blockbuster moves. Sure, it's fun to get a DeAndre Hopkins, a Dalvin Cook, or whatever. And I know I talk about that stuff all the time on the channel. But this is the best roster Cleveland has had since they returned in 1999, without a doubt. Last year was the second best roster, right? And they improved mightily since then. Trust the pieces in place, Andrew Berry. I recently rewatched The League. Great show, by the way, the second time you watch it. And we all know that they are victims of tinkering with their rosters and whatnot for their fantasy football leagues. But for Andrew Berry, you've done your job. You killed it in free agency. You killed it in the trade market, getting Elijah Moore and Zadarius Smith. You nailed the draft, finding Cedric Tillman and Siaka Ika late day 2 picks. You've done everything you really need to do. Now, if a certain player comes available that you do not expect to be for a very low price tag, sure, that could alter decisions. But Andrew Berry, enjoy the summer. Enjoy 4th of July. Kick back, relax a little bit. The hard work is over. Now it is up to Kevin Stefanski to put together this elite roster littered with Pro Bowl and All-Pro talent on both sides of the football. and improvements on the coaching staff with Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone. The hard work is over, AB. Don't tinker with this roster because you get a little bit bored. As fun as it is for me and the fans and whatnot to get some news dumps in July, ultimately, if the Cleveland Browns roster right now is the same roster going into training camp and going into week 1 against Cincinnati, is anyone going to be upset about that? I certainly won't be. Now, before we get on out of here, a couple of quick things for everyone watching. The NBA draft is creeping up, and I've heard some buzz that the Cavs might be looking to trade into round 1 of the draft. So you can watch our NBA draft coverage here at Chat Sports all night long this Thursday. Go to youtube.com/Chat Sports and also follow me on Twitter at Matthew Petey. If you share this video and tag me on Twitter, I'll give you a shout out on either tomorrow or Thursday's live show. I'll kind of round up all the recent shares we had on Twitter. And as always, we end the show with a random card drawing. Kind of reward everyone for watching all the way through. Now, we have the ultimate services today. Trace Gerard. Trace, do you want to give us your random card pick?
I'll take the 10 of clubs.
10 of clubs? I like that. Now, no big deal. Humble brag or anything here. King of Diamonds was selected by me this past weekend. A producer has yet to get it. So it'll be curious to see if a producer matches me.
Fingers crossed. Let's go.
I wish I thought of like high stakes before I started this. I don't quite know what the bet would have been, but I would have won it. So I'm a little mad. Okay, one last cut for good measure. I'm going to go with the 4 of hearts. What'd you say? 8 of clubs.
No!
8 of clubs, which I feel like we recently had. Okay, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see everyone later.